Hello, and welcome to the Theological Family Ministry Podcast, a podcast for parents as well as children and youth ministry leaders. We are dedicated to showing how theological study and biblical application relate to the discipleship of children and youth. As always, we're hosted by Pastor Ben Palaz, the pastor of family and children's discipleship at Curtis Baptist Church in Augusta, Georgia, and Tony Trusoni, the family and student pastor at Faith Family Church in Finksburg, Maryland.
Well, hello, Tony. How are you today?
I am doing well. Wished in Maryland or Wisconsin. Was in the NCAA men's basketball tournament, but they are not.
I haven't really kept up with that. I've heard a little bit here and there on the morning drive to work for just a few minutes, but we're down to the Sweet 16 now?
We are. By the time this is posted, I think we'll probably be around Final Four or even later than that.
Okay. Yeah, that is a fun time. I didn't do a bracket this year, but I missed the one when you and I used to work together. We did that bracket. It was fun to, just kind of track your own progress, but haven't done one since then. So, Tony, I've got an interesting question for you today. It may seem like trivia, but what profession is the least likely to get divorced?
Ooh.
Do you know?
I'm not going to say actors. Actors definitely would not be on that list. Let's see. Maybe roofers because they might fall off the roof and not have to get divorced.
Valiant effort. Okay, so I didn't see this one, but agricultural engineers apparently top the list of least likely to get divorced, and farmers are not that far behind. So something about that industry that just, I guess, people of the earth, those folks stay married. Some of the people at the top of the list, I don't remember where actors fell in if I saw it on the statistics that I found, but some professions that you wouldn't be surprised by, but I'll leave those off. But we know that it's been said for a long time that divorce is a problem in America and in the church. But we don't talk so much about divorce as about marriage in the context of family discipleship today, and how important that is. So, Tony, has it ever been hard for you to work on the health of your marriage with your kids in the picture?
Absolutely, 100%. I can think of even often example would be, when you get home from a long, stressful day, and the nature of human sin is to unleash that stress out on other people. And when I come home and the kids are screaming, that can make things quite tense. And I know for my wife, who's had to put up with the screaming kids all day, and I know also it's hard with, especially with kids in the picture, because alone time without kids becomes increasingly rare when you have children, especially multiple children.
Yes, definitely so. And they're blessings from the Lord, but you only have so much time and attention and energy, and it's now divided in multiple directions. Especially, like you said, when you have multiple children, so there's less individual attention that any one person can get. So I think pretty much anybody would know what that struggle is like. So what are some of those normal challenges that people face with trying to maintain the health of their marriage while also trying to nurture and care for their kids?
Would you describe life as being busy when you have kids, Ben?
Yes. And, we work to not be overly busy with all sorts of extracurricular things, and we still find ourselves with plenty to do.
Yeah, I think one is that. Busyness. No matter what, you're going to be busy when you're raising kids, when you're raising even teenagers. I think also some of the normal challenges in this capacity are going to be seeing each other as parent partners, not as a couple is going to be a tendency, a temptation at least. I know many married couples that have said that when they're raising kids, they feel like parents are working together more than they feel like a couple. And fortunately, I will say that has been less the case with us, that I think me and my wife have been blessed to rarely relate as just co-parents, but very much as a married couple first. But I think also kids can be the biggest thing to fight about. I mean, there's been a lot of studies on reasons people have fights, and children and how you raise children are certainly a very high thing on the list of what married couples fight about.
Yeah. I mean, you can look at reasons people get divorced and that kind of thing as indicators, I guess, answers to this question. But and just plain old sin can get in the picture. You've got, in a marriage, two sinners, and then you add some children to the mix, and then you just, the sinning potential is just grown exponentially. So those are just things that everybody faces, whether they are no matter what kind of work, whether they're agricultural engineers or farmers or pastors or what have you. So since we're helping to form our kids' worldviews, and that's not just our young kids, that's our teenagers as well, to help form their worldview and their beliefs about the Lord, and they're dependent on us in various ways. So given those things, shouldn't we just pour everything into them, including trying to make disciples of them?
No, I mean, that's not biblical at all, I would say. In fact, I think there's more in the Bible about leading your spouse, about being a godly husband or a godly wife, than there really is about leading kids, frankly. I think our marriages, Lord willing, will be relationships that last longer than our parenthoods. Best case scenario, you're going to have the kids with you in the house for 18 years. Maybe you'll have the kids in your house 40 years. I hope not. But your marriage, it should be a lot longer than that. God willing, and the creek don't rise. But
playing Fortnite in the basement.
Exactly. Sad. But it's not even good for our kids, I think, when we prioritize our children over our spouses within the house. I don't think it's good for their discipleship. I don't think it's good for their healthy development by any stretch of the imagination. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm right on with you. But, it seems like in our day that, and maybe I'm sure every generation has struggled with this maybe to some extent, but it does seem very pronounced in our generation now that's gotten flipped, and I think it happened before us, maybe even in our lifetime or in the lifetimes of people that we know, but it just has grown to be a monster now. And so, I mean, we should probably just do a whole episode about this, but you've heard about the helicopter parenting. Have you heard of lawnmower parenting?
What is lawnmower parenting?
Okay, so I only found out about this a couple of weeks ago, but it's like the lawnmower parent sort of mows down all obstacles or whatever in front of their child so that they can just, skate through. But you see this, or parents just devoting so much energy to their child and, taking them to this practice and this lesson and this and that, and their life is just consumed with the child. But I was listening to another podcast, and they were talking about, our children are not our employers, and they're also not our gods or our monarchs that we have to dutifully serve. Doesn't mean that we don't love them and nurture them and care for them, but we don't pour our whole lives into them to the neglect of other God-given relationship and responsibilities. So, what can kids and youth, what can they taste and see specifically about the Lord when we are actively working on our marriage in front of them?
Yeah. So I think we've talked some before, just a little bit, about how marriage is a typology. I think marriage was actually even given to us as a typology, which kind of means an image that points at a greater spiritual truth. And it's a typology specifically of the relationship between Christ and his church. Christ is the great bridegroom and the church is his bride. So I think marriage exists to point to the gospel in that way. And this typology of marriage is really most effective with our kids. Our kids see the gospel in our marriages more than really anybody could. And I think an example of this has been in my life, that what I've seen. So I remember a case where there was a godly couple in our church back in Kentucky, and they had kids at a point where we didn't even have kids yet. And I remember he was giving such a great example of this. I remember the husband was short with his wife, and not a really significant, terrible way by any stretch. But he stopped in that moment, and he apologized, not just to his wife, but in front of the kids, but to each of his children individually, about how he failed at exemplifying Christ. He failed at showing them what a godly husband is. I think that's a great example of how children can taste and see that the Lord is good through marriage and parenting.
Yeah, that's a powerful example that has stuck with you for several years, and I think that pattern, would stick with his own children. And you're right. I mean, you just can't I remember as I was preparing to get married, I was listening to a series of sermons John Piper did, however, 10 plus years ago on marriage. And he kept saying throughout the series, you can't say enough. And his wife, he told him to say this, you can't say enough that marriage is about Christ and the church. And it's just something that's built into the fabric of our lives, this daily reminder that that relationship is about something bigger, and it's about Jesus. And so I think, yes, as we're seeking to honor Jesus and tell the truth about him and his people in that relationship, the kids are going to see the goodness that flows out of that, and see maybe it'll take a little time, but they can see God's kindness in providing a mom and a dad who are trying to love each other and to lead them and to love Jesus at the same time. What other kind of truths do you think that they might learn, not so much specifically about the Lord, but just in general, as their mom and their dad invest in their relationship in view of the kids?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that they will learn that they're not that important. And in 2019, saying that is like tautonymous to child abuse, but it's not. And that they're not that important, that they're not the center of the universe. And that even their more important relationships...
They're not special?
They're not special, no. And even that there should be a more important relationship their parents have than the relationship with them. And it should be the relationship with one another. And I think that it will also... it will set them up to for their potentially the most important relationship they will have in life. We don't know if our kids will get married or not. They could be single and glorify the Lord in singleness. And I'd actually love to one day have a podcast on raising kids that might become single and not idolizing marriage. But nonetheless, I think the reality is for most of our kids, they are probably going to get married, and they're going to get married, and that relationship will be the most important relationship that they'll ever have, and they need to be equipped for it. They need to be ready and strengthened for that relationship.
Yeah, it's so true. I like the idea as well that you were suggesting. I think but that's a no small thing, them seeing that they're not the center of the universe, or even of mom and dad's lives. I read somewhere within the last year or so, someone talking about maybe some people that have been treated like that when they were younger, then when they become adults and they get married and the spouse doesn't always just treat them like their parents did, they have a hard time coping emotionally with that. And so anyway, it was an interesting perspective. But I think, that kids and youth can see just what love looks like in commitment. They can learn humility, like you were talking about with your friend that apologized, sought forgiveness from the individual members of his family. They can see what respect looks like, self-giving, and conflict resolution. And that takes wisdom. I know you certainly don't work out all of your conflicts in front of your kids, but there's some level of that. The amount of conflict that you resolve that just takes judgment and wisdom. But I think there's something that they can glean from that. So, Tony, what danger is there if we pour so much into them, including spiritually training them, not just, taking them to this practice and that practice and buying them awesome stuff, but actually, trying to disciple them, that we neglect our marriage in the process? Yeah,
I think we will become those co-parents. I think that is a great danger and worry that if we focus so much on them in that kind of way, if we pour so much more into our kids in our marriage, we will just become two parents, the dad and the mom that live together rather than a married couple. And there's a reason why divorce often happens when children leave the nest. And I think the reason why is because spouses that have identified themselves first and foremost as mom and dad rather than husband and wife lose any purpose of the relationship after the kids get out of the house. And I think it's disastrous for that. I think that also we won't even be in our discipleship of our kids. If we don't focus on our marriage first, we won't even be united in our front. We won't have a united front in the discipleship of our next generations.
That's a good point. That